Hello and welcome to the fourth installment of Increasing Loudness. I'm your host, Daniel Jason Booth. You're watching Sound Booth Tutorials. Alrighty, so over the last few weeks I've been talking on a basic level about increasing loudness. We've talked about serial compression, parallel compression, and limiting. What if we want to get even more squeeze out of our mix? So the next strategy is clipping. It's okay to have things clipping a little bit every now and then, but constant clipping obviously becomes harsh and it doesn't sound that great. Primarily what I'm talking about here are plugins that do the actual clipping. So clipping is a little bit like limiting in that you're pushing those peaks into the ceiling. Instead of bringing a threshold down, you're pushing it into the threshold, okay? And that threshold is the absolute ceiling. When you're doing that in a plugin, you're simulating pushing that peak into the ceiling, and some of them will round off the transients. They're called soft clippers. They have a sound. Sometimes that sound works, sometimes it doesn't. I would approach it much the same way as I would with limiting. When you're pushing it, you want to adjust the output so that you can hear what artifacts that's adding, okay? Because it's always going to add something. Often I've found myself in the midst of a mix and I've looked down, I'm loving the sound of the mix, and then I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh, hang on, I'm clipping this track, and this track. And what I've found sometimes is if I pull back the level on that and I rebalance everything and I make it so that it's, basically as it was, but it's not clipping anymore, it doesn't have the sound that I'm after. You can get away with it a little bit. Sometimes that's a cool sound. Clipping will basically, if you're doing it in a plugin, what they're doing is simulating pushing the peaks into a false ceiling, okay? And they'll start to round off the transients. Eventually you'll get to a point where you hit a lot of distortion, and so it's a matter of, as we did with the limiting, you want to find that sweet spot where the distortion is pleasant and it's not that noticeable. Generally, if you've done everything I've already spoken about, serial compression, parallel compression, limiting, a bit of clipping after that, after you've already reduced the peaks, it's probably not going to be that noticeable, but it might give you just that little extra bit, half dB here or there, that eventually adds up at the mix bus level. That's my fourth strategy for increasing loudness. Not necessarily a common strategy and not necessarily a subtle strategy, but it is a strategy and it's one that I've used from time to time. If you have any questions, please leave them below and I will see you in the next video. Happy mixing.